Yeah, I'm sort of, yeah, there's quite a lot really going on. I'm preparing for the intensive next 2 weeks time, so that's uh, deconstruction and the mind and expanding our consciousness.
Ooh.
That'll be fun. I've got some really good stuff on that, which I've not done before, and um, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it'll be sort of quite practical in terms of lots of activations about engaging the mind and God engaging the mind, and I've sort of worked out the whole issue of mindfulness
Hmm.
and sort of meditation is a big one out there, and a lot of people are looking for something to get their life into a little bit more of a state of rest, if you like.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, actually, that's really what the whole Engaging God program is about. It's bringing us to a place of rest so that we can actually begin to function
Hmm.
in sonship in a completely different way than what
Yeah.
we're used to.
Yeah.
And so I started to look around at sort of just to see what was going on out there in the world of meditation, and found there's it's big business. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's like multi-million-dollar companies and things doing mindfulness techniques and all these things. So I thought, well, I'll have a look at it and see, well, what does it look like from and how do I sort of think, or how do I live in, does it line up with that or whatever? So I had a look at one guy's stuff, and he's a really nice guy, and it was actually really good. And I found he did a free course on 6 steps of meditation, and so I thought, oh, okay. So I looked at it. I thought, yeah, this is really good. And I thought, well, actually, I do this. This is what I do every day. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't model it. Well, I don't present it like that, but actually, I do all those steps every day. So I thought, well, okay, well, maybe it will be very helpful for people to have a sort of Christian mindfulness meditative model, at least to
Oh.
get them started.
Yeah.
So I started to just look at what I do on a daily basis and how I live, and how I've learned to frame reality and use conscious minds, consciousness and states of consciousness that most
Hmm.
people can't access. So I thought, oh, well, this is how this all works. So I sort of look, I'm thinking, of like, the mind has 4 different uh, wavelengths that it functions at. So you got sort of the beta state, which is sort of 12 hertz, I think, and higher. And that's what most people do all the time. And their just mind is focused on what they know and what their abilities are and how they can figure out using logic, or, and that state gets very mixed up with emotion. And if you're in an emotional situation, your beta self doesn't work very well. It gets messed up and disturbed when emotions get
Mm.
involved in logic, you know. And then there's the alpha state, where that sort of goes down to about 8 hertz, I think. And but usually people have to enter an alpha state by closing their eyes and trying to shut out everything. But most people can't do it because they shut their eyes and they still mind is still racing with all the things they were trying to figure out before. So
Yeah.
trying to slow it down a little bit, so they dial it down, so they're not trying to continue to work out their own issues, is quite difficult for people. But those that can, then you begin to engage more of the intuitive and creative side of you, which is how God made us. So God has made us, and we can access parts of us which are not normally accessible when you're trying to work it out from memory and knowledge and what you
Hmm.
know. So there's more to us than just our knowledge base. There's the ability to be creative and to be intuitive, which is created by God, but it's still limited to, if you're not connected to God in the spirit, then it's still limited to the physical realm, if you like.
Yeah.
And then there's theta waves, and theta waves function at a slower thing, and those seem to be the more spiritual side, and but if you're not connected to God and one spirit with him, then you're pretty much stuck trying to get revelation out of your spirit if you don't connect it to the omniscience of God. And your spirit everyone's spirit has memory of an eternal consciousness, which is beyond the physical, but it's not really connected to most people's soul. So most people really can't access it very easily. So they can't really get to that consciousness state that accesses theta waves or spirituality or spiritual insight. Now, some people try and do it, obviously, through techniques, and and then they're looking to sort of go into the more transcendental type stuff, but it's still limited, But when we're connected to the eternal sense of God, and then our theta waves, and particularly if we're living in the realms of heaven, then our theta waves can be a complete conduit from heaven into our conscious mind to bring heavenly solutions and heavenly perspective and God's perspective and God's heart and all that into our daily life. And then you then have the lowest or the slowest form of thing, which is delta waves, which is generally only accessible while you sleep. Unless you've trained your mind like some of the, masters have done to sort of, be able to almost live in that sort of meditative state. Most of them aren't living a normal life. They're just sort of stuck away in a cave somewhere, or, up a mountain somewhere. So I was looking at all this and I was like, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I live from a state of rest? Because that's actually what the delta wave is. So I don't need to be asleep to be at rest. Because Jesus said, well, all who are weary and heavy laden, go come to me and find rest. So how do I access a state of rest, which is a state of consciousness, which is really connected to Jesus? And he said, well, it's quite simple. You learn from me. So, well, that's a good place to start. I'll learn from him, And he said, well, obviously, eventually it's like my yoke is easy, my burden's light, because that's sort of like, well, here's what it means when you can live free from all these trying to sort it out yourself and the DIY life path. But it's really learn from me, because I'm gentle and humble in heart, and that's the key. Well, what does that mean? Well, I remember in 2010 in heaven, Jesus gave me a whole exposition of what that passage meant. And so I had a real sort of, this is really important. And I've always been connected to that, gentleness being the state of knowing your strength, but your strength being focused in the right direction, which is God's direction. And then humility is knowing your identity and completely accepting it as God states it to be, not who you think you are from an earthly perspective, which is where most people get trouble with rest, because they're stuck in a mindset and belief system which actually limits them to their life experiences mostly, and the trauma and the negativity of that. So I sort of started putting all this together, and eventually I sort of think, well, what do I do every day when I engage? And I sort of found this 6-step process to begin to bring me from my beta wave normal everyday state for most people, which I tend not to function at, to being able to be at rest, and then to function from that place of rest in a completely different way in terms of the power of our consciousness to create reality and choose reality and effectively frame life around time and space, and not being restricted by physical time and all those things. And so I worked out this sort of basically 6-part thing. And number 1 is live loved. So it's engage first love, so, and to start with, but where do we start? Well, let's start with God. So generally in mindfulness things and meditation, people are taught to slow down. So usually by focusing their breathing. So I thought, okay. Well, didn't God breathe into Adam the breath of life? So that'll be a good place to start. I'm going to get to the place where I'm going to breathe in deeply the breath of God, and then I'm going to breathe out. And then, of course, that is associated with his name, Yod Hey Vav Hey. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, the rhythm of life, the rhythm of breathing, actually sounds like Yod Hey Vav Hey when you actually do it.
Yeah.
Exhaling, because you breathed in the breath of God, you breathe out Yod Hey Vav Hey. And it's just like, it sounds like, because it is. And when
Yeah.
you focus it, you're actually just, well, now God's in me. I am connected, and now I'm going to engage with him in me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm now at that point where I've slowed down my breathing. I'm focused on the very fact that I have God in me. I'm in, he's Yod Hey Vav Hey lives in me, and now I'm going to engage him. So I'm going to engage first love. So I open my first love gate. I I welcome love. The love of God fills me. He embraces me. Father, Son, and Spirit embrace me. I'm surrounded by love. I let love fill my spirit, flow out through my soul gates, touching all the areas of my soul, coming around my body. So actually now my whole body can come into that place where I feel loved and totally in that place of acceptance and affirmation and all those things. So I can start there. So I'm living loved. I'm just feeling absolutely just loved. And then, okay, where do you start next? Well, joy. Okay, so love, joy. Well, how do you get joy? Well, Jesus said he was give us his joy, but to be joyful, you got to stop focusing on all the groaning, moaning, complaining of life, and you got to start being thankful and grateful. And so it's like, okay, well, so I'm in Thanksgiving, the fruit of our lips, and I just love thanking God and blessing, thanking him for how much he loves me. And so I'm just taking my focus of all the negative things that may be going on around my life. And I'm just going to create this gratitude for life. I love living. So life now, this is a pleasure. This is an opportunity. This is joy, not, obligation, duty, heavy going, it's like,
Yeah.
so joy. And then I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do? So I'm going to release love out. I release that love out to the world. It's going out as a river of living water, if you like. Now I'm going to release joy into the atmosphere around me. So it's not going to be contained in me. I'm going to live with an atmosphere of joy. So then next thing, peace. Well, I can't really be at peace if I'm at war with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've got any issues, if I'm frustrated with somebody or something, I'm frustrated, I might be annoyed, someone might have upset me, someone might have hurt me. And if I've not dealt with it, I am not going to be able to live in a state of peace. So search me, O God, and show me if there's anything in my heart in an emotional sense which is actually not at peace. So someone comes to mind, I can choose to visualize that person. I'm going to choose to forgive them. I'm going to release them. I'm going to bless them. And I'm like, well, I wonder if I've upset anyone. I wonder if anything I've done that's maybe, created tension in the relational realm. And then it's like, okay, I might think of something. Well, I'm gonna ask them to forgive me, and I'm going to see them releasing forgiveness to me. So I'm going to come into this place of rest, peace. I'm just going to come, and now I'm not in tension. I'm not anxious, worried, concerned. And I'm going to release peace through. It's going to touch my soul. It's going to come all over my body. It's going to go out through me into the world around me. So I've got an atmosphere of love, joy, and peace. So that really is that's the government of rest. That's the three things that come in together to bring me into a place of rest. So now I can look at my day from a place of rest. So now I'm going to think about my scroll for the day, my mandate, my destiny for today. I'm going to think about it, and I'm just going to start to just think of the opportunities for my day and things I might know about today, but I'm going to see them from a different perspective. I'm looking at fruitfulness. So I have a mandate to be fruitful and to increase in everything I do. So I'm blessed. So I'm blessed and highly favored. So I'm going to start to see my life in a different way as opportunities, and that today is going to be pleasurable, and if there are obstacles in my way today, then those obstacles can be moved out of my way. So I start to look at maybe some specifics, visualizing my day, thinking about my day from a rest perspective. Then I'm going to then start to then frame my day. So the fifth thing, I'm going to frame my day because I'm now from that place of rest. I have my mandate, my destiny. It's all framed, but I know I'm going to actually call it into being, release, declare, decree, frame all that I'm going to need for today, all the favor and blessing of God, everything else, all that stuff. And then I'm going to finish with, now I'm going to complete the circle. So I'm now going to go back into Yod He Vav He's in me, but I'm in Yod He Vav He. So I'm stepping into his name. I am in him. I am taking the position in the order of Melchizedek. I am now a royal priest. I'm an oracle. I'm a legislator. I have the empowerment of being in the power of attorney of his name. And I'm standing in this place, which brings the end and the beginning back together. And now my day is framed. I can live from a place of rest. Now I'm operating in my consciousness at a completely different level. So I've learned to do this really, not really thinking about the steps as steps over the last, 4 or 5 years. And it's how I live, and.
Who was the guy whose course you looked at? Do you remember his name?
No, I don't remember his name. It was
I was just curious.
Yeah. It was actually, yes, I do. It was, the thing was Mind Valley. That's the web page. It's Mind Valley. And his name is sort of some foreign sounding name, a little bit like a Lushti or something like that. But he's a nice guy, and everything he does, is nothing wrong in it. And he talks about some of these steps and whatever, and it's great, but it's limited, because it's limited.
Oh, yeah.
What you already know, because you're not connected to God. And people try and connect to the cosmic consciousness, and they're looking to try and connect to the universe and all that stuff. But in reality, they're not. They're just trying, but they're not, because they can't without being engaged.
I got a free book, and because I'm on a couple websites, and they'll tell you like, hey, this is a book today, and I get all kinds of stuff. I got book, of everything. And there's one that I'm just reading now because Joe saw the same thing. I think he downloaded it because we both looked at it and said, okay, now this is going to be interesting. Now this guy says that he's a Christian, but he's also a Rosicrucian. He believes in reincarnation. He is like all over the map. And he states purposely that he refers to the universal mind, that he doesn't use the term God, even though he claims he's a Christian, because there are some people that would find that offensive. And so there are times he will use it. And so he's going into, like, okay, well, like, the reincarnation is really real. And this one guy who was a Baptist minister researched the scripture and said, yeah, he came to the conclusion it was. And I'm thinking the whole thing like,
nah.
Yeah, nah. You are all over that. And some of the stuff that he says is really legitimate, but it's like, yeah, but you're missing the point. You're trying to do it on your own. And you can do a lot of this stuff, but if you're not going through the proper channels, you can get really, really out in left field. Like there's a guy here, has a TV show here called Expedition Unknown, and he's an archaeologist by training. And he does a lot of things, goes all over the world, and they go and they look at stuff. Well, he just did this thing on, is there an afterlife? And it was actually very, very interesting. And he's not a believer. And he's got this friend who's allegedly this world-renowned psychic. And according to this guy who is a psychic, he's been this way all his life. He's been this way as a kid. And I'm sitting there thinking like, well, yeah, I understand where you're getting your power from. You're getting fed, you're a nice guy and you're not trying to harm anybody, but you're not really getting it from the right source. And so, but what was interesting is he had a group of people there, that the guy that runs the show interviewed a group of people, all people who had died. legitimately died. One lady was like underwater for 30 minutes. She's like a spine surgeon. And they all talked about experiencing love. And everyone came back with the thing is, the most important thing in life is love.
Mm.
Junk all the rest. That is the most important thing. And they said when they finally got into that state where they actually experienced it, they didn't want to come back, because it was like, hey, we would much rather stay here. And when they came back, and most of them, I got the impression they didn't come around and say, but it's sort of like, okay, I think you're already a believer, so I understand where you're coming from. Just the way that they would couch some of the things that they said was that they wanted to bring that experience back. Their whole thing was, it's all about love. I want to be able to share this love. Well, he gets into an exorcism. This Catholic priest allows him into an exorcism, and they're filming this. That was a little crazy. And I'm thinking, I don't know that I would be in that room, because this guy who's the head of the show, as far as I know, he's not a believer. I'm like saying, like, man, you have just, I would not expose myself to something like that voluntarily, just out of curiosity. And it was a really, really bizarre scene. And they were interviewing this priest who's been doing this for like 20 years. And he said to me, he goes, well, how do you know when somebody's just trying to fake you out, where they're just acting as opposed to something that was legitimate? And he was talking about some of the things that he looks for. And he said, hey, look, I've had broken ribs. I've had people go totally ballistic. And the bottom line is, it really is a decision of the person. You cannot make the spirit come out if that person really in their heart of hearts doesn't want to let it go. He'll work with you, but if you get to the point that you really don't want to let it go, it's like there's no magic pill.
Yeah.
Well, just watching that was pretty freaky. Well, then he gets into this thing about going into your past life regressions. And so they're filming this thing while he's going through this past life regression, and this therapist, whatever, is talking him through this, and he's under hypnosis, and this is this. And I'm sitting there thinking the whole time, it's like, dude, you got a revelation, but you did not get where you were before. You were just having a spirit, not a nice spirit, just feeding you information, because of course they know the past.
Yeah.
They can tell you everything, and you can go check it out, and it's going to be legit because they know the past. And I was just like, I can see where people are so, you can be so desirous, you really want to have answers, but if you don't go to the right source, you can get told all kinds of stuff. I mean, in this book I'm reading, he's talking about, well, sometimes maybe the reason that the person is gay because in a past life they were, this guy was a woman in a past life, and so he's coming back here, and so that's why he's got sexual confusion. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You can try to justify it, but like, nah.
Yeah. And that the whole issue of that falls down when you see accounts of many different people actually believing they were the same person.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't have been. They couldn't have all been the same person, because that person only lived one life.
Yeah.
So, how many people were Marilyn Monroe, or, Chief Sitting Bull, or somebody that, I've heard lots of different ones, but so many people say they're the same. And that is the issue, because lots and lots of demons were probably in some of them. So they can spread it around quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
In terms of, hey, we got some insight into this knowledge of this person's life because actually we were involved with them.
Yeah.
Familiar spirits and are very familiar.
Yeah.
So yes, they can give information. And I think this comes down to, we do have an eternal spirit, but it's one spirit who's in one body.
Yeah.
I assume. I guess, I don't know, but I, from my own perspective, I wasn't hearing anybody else.
Yeah.
Because I was, for me, in this person. But my soul was only actually came to life once my spirit came and joined my body. I didn't have a pre-existing soul. But some people teach the pre-existing soul. Yeah. And I think that's where, if there's a pre-existing soul, then people could get into the reincarnation stuff. And I think some of some of the stuff that, I'm not saying Dr. O says this, but some of the people who are around Dr. O were talking about sort of the existing soul, and it sounded very reincarnational, because they were saying, well, this soul may have existed but I don't believe that. I don't
Yeah.
believe in the pre-existing soul. I do believe in a pre-existing spirit,
Spirit. Yeah.
that we can reconnect to, and we can re-engage and rediscover our eternal identity and things we're involved with, and
Yeah.
it does help us become a whole being and be at
Right.
peace with ourselves. But a lot of these things, as you say, are just they're
Now,
selling people a delusion,
yeah.
and then people get trapped into it, really.
Yeah.
That,
Now, for the benefit of the guy who's writing the book, he did acknowledge that there is the demonic realm. And the point that he made was, he said that he thinks he goes, for people that are curious, he goes, it's probably even worse than what you ever thought. It's like, this is something you really don't want to be around, because it's way worse than what you've ever imagined. So, I mean, at least he did throw that caveat in there. It's like, yeah, you don't want to go there. But then he's got all this other stuff about, going into hypnosis, and he talks about remote viewing and all the paranormal and things like that. And I'm thinking like, oh, well, yeah, I can see where some of that it is possible, but you've got to be going at it through the right source, because otherwise.
absolutely. I mean, we did the same thing with, okay, you have a memory. Jesus wants to walk back with you into that memory, wants to actually take you through the memory and heal you of the memory and that is a form of regression. It's a form of, they're not necessarily hypnotized, although essentially they could be in a hypnotic state.
Yeah.
But essentially it's all centered in the truth, in the life, and Jesus himself engaging that person, and obviously then engaging alters or dissociative parts, which also may be unable to come into the light because they're afraid or hiding or whatever. And so we can engage, the truth, the Prince of Peace, with all those fragmented, broken parts. And that's all, again, all part of helping those parts to come into a reintegrated state. And all that stuff is great, but it's done with Jesus. It's not done with some spirit guide or, some familiar spirit or some past regressive life and all that stuff. It's done with Jesus. And yes, Jesus wants to restore our history, our memory, our past. He wants to deal with trauma. He wants to heal us. He wants to make us whole. And part of that is, yes, we can use sound. We can use oils to help accentuate that. We're using oils in some of that, releasing toxic emotions and different things. And, when you start to talk to somebody and you're like, okay, we want you to begin to seek and see if God shows you any memories of any trauma. When you start to introduce a particular oil blend into that process, it crosses the limbic system, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, it just opens up the memory. It just does. It operates at a frequency which connects to the memory, and then people find it much easier to then engage the memory and find the trauma or whatever the memory was released. So there are things which do help, and we use sound as well. Sometimes I use the crystal bowls and I play a particular frequency and I release an intent and let this sound penetrate beyond the boundaries of your consciousness and allow them, because the intent is search my heart, oh God. So come and search, but not opening our mind to anything that we would, it's because it isn't opening your mind, emptying your mind. And this is where, the meditative state is not emptying your mind, it's filling your mind. It's focusing your mind. That's the whole difference between some of the more transcendental states. Very much will open your mind and see what will come in. Doing that, thank you very much.
No, not going there.
Sort of the ones who are generally looking at more of a mindfulness, a way of helping people to deal with the stresses of life, bringing them into a little happier state. They don't tend to do that. They tend to focus and actually begin to think of positive things, begin to, but again, it's just limited by the person, because it's do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's nothing outside of yourself. And you may, we want to help them connect to God that's in them, looking to reveal himself as the true light.
Right.
But you can't really engage him until you've engaged him. And that then changes the whole dynamic, because you have access to the realm of the spirit, which goes beyond the physical person, to the
Correct.
omniscience of God, if you like, and then also
Mm-hmm.
to our own spirit. And this is where most people are trying to connect spiritually, but they're doing it through the soul. Hence people astral projecting and all that stuff. And most of the new agey type stuff, we talk about it as spirituality, but most of it is soul. It's looking to engage in techniques of the soul and looking to engage in other spirits. This is the problem. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not with your own spirit, but as much with familiar spirits who are masquerading as your own spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or not. Sometimes, as when people really open themselves up to that stuff, they have spirit guides. Well, we have angels,
Yeah.
which are spirit guides in a sense, but in the right way and from
And
the right source, because they've been appointed to us to help us and help guide us into our inheritance.
mm-hmm.
So we do have some insight sources we can tune to, who can, like the seven spirits of God, for instance, are all
Yeah.
there to help us come into our identity and come into the knowledge. So when I engage in this meditative state, I'm looking to engage the seven spirits of God, who will bring me to a place of wisdom, knowledge, understanding, counsel, strength, but
Yeah.
all tied to the fear of the Lord and the Spirit of the Lord, not anything external.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that's the difference in these things. And you have to be discerning. So when I sort of engage with this guy, the stuff that I engage with, just to see, well, how are these people marketing this? How are they sort of promoting it? And I thought, well, and I was like, but I knew there was no sense of anything in it, which in the stuff I heard anyway, which was
Yeah.
negative. It was basically all looking to focus, get yourself centered into a more state of happiness, really, and feeling, de-stressed.
Yeah.
But it was limited, but we're not limited. That's the thing. We have not limited by the physical realm. We're not limited by
Correct.
any natural, physical, spiritual realm of occupied by anything else. We can engage the eternal realm. We can engage the heavenly realms. We can actually continually flow from those heavenly realms. And therefore, we have a completely different objective in this, which is not self-centered.
Right. And we're operating in a different base.
Yeah.
We're not, yeah, it's a totally different. It may sound similar. It sounds similar, but the foundation is totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't think there's anything per se wrong with bringing your soul into a state of de-stress. There's nothing wrong in it. It's not doing
Yeah.
anything wrong spiritually. It's just limited. It's not the fullness of it. It's only ever going to be limited by your own self, because it isn't, although, I think he sort of talks about, well, you need to engage a higher power, but it's like, but he's not, you don't know how to do that,
Yeah.
and when you're talking about a higher power, then you're opening yourself up to any other power. That's the problem, when you don't engage a personal relationship with
Yeah.
God himself.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's the bit where it's like, no, this is where you're now go, because you don't know, this is trying to engage something outside of yourself,
Yeah.
which you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be wanting to engage some power that I don't know what it is.
Oh yeah, because you could get a really nasty surprise. And so when watching this TV show and listening to this guy Chip Coffey, who they claim is this world-renowned psychic, he did a reading on air of the host, and he really was spot on. But I'm thinking everything you're telling him about is something that happened in the past.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds like as a young child, this wasn't something that he was looking for. His parents realized at a very early age he was tuned into something, and they didn't discourage it. They just always thought, okay, and I'm thinking like, okay, wow, there you are as a young child, and for some reason there was some open door that something came into your life. Now you're not, you're not a raving, Satanist, but you have this allegedly this gift, and it was like the real manifestation of like when it's done the false way, even though this guy is doing it, with probably the very best intentions. Yeah, you do have that power, but it's where that information is coming from, because he's talking about, well, the person actually comes to him, I'm thinking like, nah.
But I think when you, all of us have, I mean, Jesus was able to do that. He was able to read the thoughts and intentions of people's hearts. He was able to see Nathaniel sitting under a tree, and he was able to tell him what he did. So
I know what's interesting about that. What's interesting about that passage of scripture when it's talking about when he saw him under the tree. I was reading a book about culture, and that in that culture that talked about that was something that happened to you as a youth, because as a child, that tree is where the mother, I mean, it was all tied into something that happened to him. So it wasn't just like, he wasn't just saying, hey, I just saw you sitting there over in that tree. It was like, no, I saw you back as an infant.
Yes, absolutely. But the reality is there was obviously the power that he had in his mind, the power of his consciousness to engage and see things that others couldn't see. So I do believe that some people have those abilities switched on where most of the people don't. The problem is they then attract the wrong source to it. It's done independently through the power of the soul. And although those abilities are there, I mean, the ability of our mind to engage, in telepathy and to think of, I think there are things that Adam didn't need to speak in the same way. There was mind to mind, there was heart to heart, there was always that was part of who we were. Now those abilities were switched off. Now you get some of them turned on in people who are savants, amazing abilities with numbers, or amazing abilities to play anything by listening, or also because certain abilities of the brain, but mostly in those people, they lose the other aspects of relational, social interaction and skills, because some areas are therefore switched off because they're focused in one area and it's not balanced. But we should be able to actually see our mind, our consciousness, actually reconnected to all of those abilities, every one that Jesus had, and perhaps others that he didn't, because he said there were greater things. Perhaps, I'm not saying yes or no to that, but whereas then we can then begin to do that from the motivation of God's heart, and only doing what he sees him doing, not self-promoting, not using it to build our own ego or to build fame, or to use it to, in a sense, promote ourselves. Because that's the difference when you come from the knowing the heart of God in it. The whole focus is changed. It's not about me anymore. It's about bringing glory to God. It's about helping people connect to God through it. So and it's the same with the gifts of the Spirit. See, the Holy Spirit will give gifts. He will give you a word of knowledge or a word of wisdom. That's just the true reality. But when you learn to engage your mind as a son, you don't need the Holy Spirit to tell you things. You can see them for yourself. That's why we can learn to see the colors and the fragrances and the frequencies that people are giving off, and learn to see what's going on in their hearts, and learn to pick up the lack of frequency or the low frequencies, and like William Branham, able to touch somebody and sense through the touch which area of their body was vibrating at a wrong frequency, and then discern that. So all these things I think are possible. And I think God wants to teach us to do it and train us to expand our consciousness and not be limited, but for the right reason, and only to bring glory to God. And when he directs, it's like, did Jesus go around every day reading everyone's thoughts like a palmist? Well, of course he didn't.
No.
But when he was authorized to, he would say, I know the thoughts and intentions of your hearts right now.
And he even talked about that that lack of faith would prevent him from being able to do things. So that even though he did have the ability, if the receptivity wasn't on the other end, it just wasn't going to happen. He just wasn't going to be able to steamroll right over and just do whatever.
Because in Nazareth, it was like, well, he couldn't do many things in Nazareth because they were all basically familiar with him as, well, that's Joseph's son.
No big deal.
No big deal. Who's he? It's like, so in that sense, I see all that. And you can see how people easily get, when they do have some connect to an ability which is open, why, without being connected to God, that can easily lead them down to the wrong path.
Yeah. And I wonder if the reason that we don't all, that everyone doesn't have all the abilities, say like we don't all have what William Brannan had. I can honestly say I couldn't touch somebody and feel the frequency. I wonder if the Lord purposely does not give everything to everyone because we're supposed to be a body. And if everybody could do everything, it would be like, I don't need you. Where we are almost forced to engage with each other and rely on each other because you may be doing something that I can't, or I'm not at that level yet. Or I'm not even destined to operate in that area. I've got something else that is my assignment. But if we all work together, like with a body, all the different parts work together, it will all work correctly. But if I'm as the hand and I'm trying to be you who is the head, it's not going to work.
No, I think there may well be something to that. I just think that when we come to a place of mature sonship, we may not be operating with everyone else then. It may be a different level of stuff we're doing in the ages to come.
But the key that you made was when you come to mature sonship.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the key.
That's the key. And when you come to mature sonship, you're not promoting yourself, putting other people down, using ego, using any of the things you can do to do anything other than bless others.
Right.
Not to do it in a way which is in any way negative or trading in the wrong motives and all that stuff.
Or promoting yourself.
Yeah. And I think there is a sense where as we mature, I think more of essentially, if God is going to restore all things, and he must restore everything back to at least where Adam was, and hopefully where Adam would have been. That's my desire. Hey, where he would have been where he would have matured. And so I think there is a sense where whatever Adam could have done and whatever he did and whatever abilities he had, which may have been switched off as a result of the fall or later on the flood and later on at Babel, there seemed to be indications that certain abilities were shut off and forbidden, at those times. I do believe there's a possibility of those being restored, but so that there is no competition. When there's a maturity, there's no competition. There's not like, hey, look at our church. We can do all this stuff and you need to come to us because we're the masters of this, and all that. Because it's like, because you don't look for self. It's all about God. It's like, this is all about, as sons of God, honoring our Father and, being co-heirs with our brother and not having any of this independent do-it-yourself path mindsets, which is what maturity deals with. There's a renewing of our mind to operate with the mind of Christ. To operate with a completely different anointed mind. Because Christ there didn't say the mind of Jesus, did it? It said the mind of Christ, which was the anointed mind and his anointing. And the whole thing was really more about function. We can function as a son of God, basically. That's really what it's saying.
Absolutely.
Well, I think there's way, way more to some of the abilities, which is why I love some of the heroes and the superhero Marvel stuff and because it sort of starts to, hey, there's way more here. Like Lucy, the film Lucy. I mean, I love Doctor Strange because Doctor Strange was here's this guy who's so intelligent and he has all these amazing physical abilities. He can do these operations, and all of a sudden he's now having to try and become operating in a different mindset and paradigm to connect to a spiritual dynamic. And it's just like, it was so funny just to sort of see his struggles with
Mm.
the logic and rational mind, and this doesn't work. And it's just, well, I've just seen it. It doesn't work. I know, and I can't do it. You know, and
Yeah,
I think it was a great,
yeah.
and obviously the special effects of operating in, you know.
Well, there's a TV show that just came on, just in this newest cycle, and it's called Manifest.
All right.
And I don't know if you've heard anything about it. Well, it's about people that they're on a plane, and the thing is, this plane, they're on this plane and they're traveling, and what they don't realize is they don't return to the US till 5 years later.
Oh, right.
They're in this time warp. Well, the main characters are this brother and sister, and while they are on the plane flying back in the 5-year gap, their mother dies. Well, the mother's favorite thing that she always told her kids was Romans 8:28. All things work together for good. And the one daughter is like, I'm so sick of hearing this. I don't want to hear this anymore. Blah, 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 blah. This is not good. Well, they have all come back, and a certain crew of them have these abilities where they will hear something and they know, I need to act. And when they do, they avert a problem, but they don't understand, where is this coming from? Something, we have connected into something, but it's all for, and so the daughter who is with Romans 8:28, she's beginning to think, you see the translation, like, I think this is coming from God, and that this is how he's directing us to do these different things. And so, but it's like these people, they're in the beginning stages trying to figure out, because they'll get a very pointed directive, go do this. Or the one guy would hear the music, and he went to find the music, and he found the actual thief, and so the innocent person got out of jail. But all these different connections. There's also the one that's called God Friended Me, and it's the kid is the son of a minister, and his mother gets cancer when he's a young kid. His mother has cancer, and he prays and prays and prays, and the mother is healed, and she gets the diagnosis that she's totally healed, and on her way home she's killed in an accident, and he is so mad at God that she was healed of cancer, but yet why didn't you stop this? Well, God sends him a friend request on Facebook. And now he's having all these things, and at first he thinks somebody's spoofing him, and he's trying to find out, well, they can't find the IP address, but he's meeting these people, and when he meets these people, it's like the one guy he gets this friend request from this guy, and he doesn't know who he is, but he sees him over by the subway. And so he decides to follow him down to try to figure out, okay, who set you up to do this? And the train is coming, and the guy gets ready, this guy, and who gets friended by God, sees that this man is going to step off in front of the train to commit suicide, yanks him back. And so it's this whole thing. So now he's finally coming to the conclusion, okay, I think this is somehow God is reaching out to me and communicating, and he's showing me, make this connection. When you make this connection, this is what happens. And it's so the whole thing of like divine connection, I thought, this is really interesting, because it's not getting played up like these people are flaky and wacky and crazy. It's like, wow, you really can hear, and things really can happen.
Awesome. I mean, you think about some older ones, like Quantum Leap. That's exactly.
I never saw that.
Oh, you never saw it? Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, but I can pick it up online and go back and look at it. So I'm going to.
Because Quantum Leap was basically this quantum accident where this guy was caught in a non-local realm, and basically it turns out at the end of the whole thing that God was basically using him to go back into people in history and put things right. And he had missions every week, and he went back into a person and became that person, but with his own consciousness to put things right. Anyway, and some of them were really fun things,
Yeah.
But some of them were like, he's like, and I could see, well, actually, I'm doing that. God is not sending me back into a person, but he's sending me back in time, and I'm ministering to people and praying for people and answering their the prayers that they've sent up to God. God's sending me as a messenger.
Yeah.
And there's another one, a new one called last year, called Travelers, and where in the in the future there is this cosmic, this consciousness computer, this supercomputer with an AI, and it again sending travelers back to stop negative things happening.
Yeah.
And what it does then, when someone's at their point of death, the exact point of death, they send someone's consciousness back into their body. So rather than die, they are occupied by this consciousness from the future with a mission.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
You know, and again, it's like it's not talking about God in the thing, but actually, you know, a super intelligence is like the super intelligence. Hey, well, actually, that's what he's doing with me and others in using us to go and do things to restore things that happen to God's original purpose. Now, I'm not changing history, and that's the point, but I'm being used in history because I'm essentially accessing outside of time and space.
Yeah.
I'm aware of it now, of course, but I've always been, they've been aware of it since it happened, you know, in the past. So it's not changing history as much as being used in history. And being used in history. You know, a friend of mine, George, from up in the Seattle area, somewhere up in Washington, somewhere, he remembered when he was a young guy, he was preaching or doing some sort of mission thing, and he for some reason he was struggling, and he basically called out on God for help. It's like, oh God, help me! I'm really struggling, and he remembers feeling strengthened. You know, really feeling strengthened and having just the ability to really do what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And then he remembered, this was a year or so ago, he basically, actually, when he was engaging heaven and he then connected to the fact that God had used himself to go back to answer his previous self's issue. So he answered his own call. So he went back, and that's why he felt so much. This was something so him, but with a authority that came from from the future, and all his knowledge of the future. So that was really cool. You know? So so he answered his own prayer. You know, God sent him.
That would make sense.
Strengthen yourself. Encourage yourself in the Lord. I mean, there's all scriptures for this stuff.
Yeah.
But encourage yourself in the Lord. Well, why not encourage yourself back 30 years ago or 40 years ago?
Yeah, that you got, it would make sense.
It's only a way of consciously being limited to one realm. And when your spirit is in the heart of God, engaging from an eternal perspective, it's all now.
Yeah.
It's all now. We just access it now. We become aware of it now, you know, because it's all now and it's non-linear. So you can't think of it as time, as a river flowing. You know, it's essentially, it's not like that in the same way, because for God, it's non-linear and all now.
Yeah.
So when we're going and stepping into that now point, we're only now aware of it, but it's all now. So we just get to be used because it's 1876 or 1752 is now still, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, for God, you know, and it becomes our now.
Yeah.
And the person's now. So we're just converging that to actually outwork. And you know, I've done a lot of that, and quite a few other people. And some of the things I've done recently is because I just say, hey, I'm available, God. Is there anything you want me to do? Any mission to go on? You know, particularly when I haven't got anything else to do. Sometimes I'm just like, hey, you know, it's like, you know. And I found myself in the Discovery House in one of those big houses, chancellor's houses in the realms of heaven, and I'm given this blueprint, just like some architect's diagram of some sort, some schematic. So I'm given this thing, and then I find myself connecting with some guy in the past who's seeking for revelation to invent something. So I just go and I just drop this schematic into his head.
Why not?
Why not? Because it's like he's calling out, he's asking for revelation. It's just like go and drop it in his head. And So what, you know, because where do inventions come from? You know, where do
Yep.
things come from? Are they just the person's own ingenuity, or actually are they out of a different thing? Well, in this situation, I saw the person. So I saw the person actually as a face.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, oh, I wonder what that invention was. So I did some Googling, and I actually found out it was the guy who invented air conditioning.
Oh yeah, Doctor. Oh, was it Carrier? I think his name was Carrier.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
And
in
basically,
Pensacola, Florida.
yeah, and I
No,
just dropped,
Apalachicola, Florida.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I just dropped this schematic for air conditioning into his head, into
yeah.
his mind. So this is really interesting. This stuff, the things you can begin doing.
And the thing was, for him, I think it was, wasn't he treating? He was treating people with TB, and they had to be quarantined. And it was because it was so hot. He was looking for something that was going to make them being in that confined space more bearable.
Yeah, because it
And
was
that's how he came up with it.
and when I sort of engage people around these issues, it's often children or the vulnerable people that you're called to go and engage with. And it's like, you know, so many times, you know, I've talked to people and we've done exercises, and they found that they've ended up engaging, rescuing children, doing stuff, you know, and because I think there's that childlike, simple faith that when a child calls out on God, that God's heart responds to his child
Yeah.
and just does stuff. You know, it's very much seems to be, you know, around that. You know, so this guy is not looking to invent something to create fame and fortune. It's
Fortune.
very much to help people.
They're very sick.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know.
No,
Yeah,
I'm glad he did because
yeah.
it's
Oh, yeah. Because we
definitely,
now benefit.
yeah, we now benefit from it. But yeah, the whole focus of it was a medical, was treating people, you know, that had TB and wanting to make life more bearable for them in Florida heat and to give them better air for breathing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So these it is fascinating, really, when you start to
Yeah.
look at when you start to be expanded beyond the limitations of what we can imagine or think, and start going into the beyond what we can imagine or think realm, which is what
Yeah.
we're told we can do. You know, God will do exceedingly abundantly beyond what we can imagine or think. But it isn't just God doing it. It's like we start to get involved in the beyond what we can imagine or think when we're available as
Yeah.
sons of God,
Yeah.
which is pretty awesome stuff, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Well, we've got about 4 more classes with the sheriff's office, and it has really been an interesting time in terms of understanding all the actual legal restraints and parameters that they have to operate under,
mm,
and why sometimes there can be a crime committed, but you don't see it prosecuted because of
mm,
evidence. And I mean, it is, they just, even for them to use force, to use lethal force, there's like a Supreme, which I never knew, there was a Supreme Court case that set down guidelines that said when you could or could not. And so they have they have a simulator, and we got to use it last week. And you were given a gun and a taser, and what it is, and you're standing in front of this wall, you have a line, and immediately a scenario will come up. Now they would sort of prompt you ahead of time. Mine was, I was in a bank. I was in a bank taking money out of the ATM. And they have actors, and they are doing a real life scenario. You are thrown into the middle of something, and you have to decide very quickly, what do I do?
mm,
And they really did a good job of making it very realistic. They had a bank robber that he comes in, he shoots the teller, and you see her get hit in the head, and she goes right down. I mean, it happens so fast. I mean, you're just in there, you know, doing your banking business, but they're letting you see this is how fast it happens. This is how little time you have to properly react.
yeah.
And I mean, it was just like, that is a really, really hard job.
Mm,
And they were even talking about us, that if you ever find yourself in an active attack, these are the things you should do. These are some of the things you shouldn't do.
mm,
Just, you know, because you may make the difference between life and death. But the fact that this stuff happens so quickly, and the fact that they have to just be able to react and assess on the fly, like, they really need prayer, because that is really, really tough to know what you're walking into and be able to handle it correctly. And even with this last time we were doing crime scene investigation, and everything that they have to go through in terms of properly collecting evidence, looking at the scene and learning from the scene and how they question people, because when you get into court, it has to be done a certain way or it's not going to happen. And that is a really big job, and it takes, and again, they have legal parameters that they have to stay within, that they can't go outside of. And they really need prayer.
Yeah, and I think that's really where, some of our involvement into our communities, we do need to start legislating and beginning to bring peace into the situations, and start not just sitting back and watching them do their job, but actually, no, we can help them by bringing peace. We can head off certain situations, because we can be seeking for that in advance, and that only happens when you're not focused on your own self all the time. We've got to take our attention off just me and myself and I to, I'm part of a bigger community here, and I'm supposed to be a blessing to my community, and as a son of God, I'm supposed to be administrating love, joy, and peace into my community, and there's a lot where it isn't. So I need to start learning how to engage and access that.
So it's been, it's opened up, I have a greater appreciation for people that do that job, and what they have, what they have to do, what they have to put up with at times, and never lose your temper. Because one guy was telling us he was involved in this really, really high-speed chase, wound up having to do what's called a pit maneuver, where they'll hit the car to spin it out. And he said he got out of the car, he goes, and I just blasted the guy. He said, I cussed him up one side and down the other. He goes, and I normally know you don't do that. He goes, and I heard about it. He said, but he said, you have so much adrenaline going that when it happens, if you don't catch yourself, you can just, it's got to come out. Well, it really helped me to understand, because the last accident I was in, I was at a red light, and for some reason I looked up in my rearview mirror, I saw the guy coming behind me, and I knew he is not going to stop. And he did. He rear-ended me. And I got out of the car, and I was fine. His car had more damage than mine. I wasn't hurt or anything, and he was so apologetic. And I found I was so angry. I was like gritting my teeth to not really let him know, but he could tell by the tone of my voice that I was not pleased. I said, and I kept afterwards thinking, like, what was that? Why was I so upset? The guy, it was an accident. He admitted he was wrong. But then after doing that, I said, because you have this physiological response.
Fight or flight. Fight, flight, or freeze is the usual three responses.
And I said, and I didn't recognize that. And it's like, that's why I kept thinking, well, what kind of a believer am I? This poor guy just caused this accident, and he's sorry, and I want to take his head off. I really wanted to rip him a new one, and I'm like, white knuckling, not really telling him, but I'm like, wait a minute, part of that is a physiological response. Now, I did have the presence of mind to, I was maybe a little terse, but not really rip him a new one. So I didn't feel that bad, because, but I forgot that there's that element of it that happens that you have to deal with. And that sometimes when a person really lashes out, it may be the release of the adrenaline, and it's,
totally,
and they don't really mean it. But like he said, he goes, I just blasted this guy. He goes, and I know better. He said, but he goes, I was just so, after this long chase, he said, and he was calm through the whole thing. He said, but when it's all over, he said, that just came out, of course for him, he said, came out the wrong way. But
and in reality, that's really where, coming from a place of rest, our spirit and soul can take captive that thought, and not, and because our body may well be, but actually we got to be like catch it. And I think the more we're in a place of rest and peace, the easier it is for us to control those bodily reactions and not react out of the wrong ones, but to operate. I mean, I had a similar one. You know, we were driving down to see my mum a couple of weeks ago, and we were just driving, you know, normally, and we came up to a junction where there was the road forked off and there was a roundabout. No, you don't tend to have too many roundabouts, but so we're on this roundabout and we're going around it, and this car comes in from the other side and sort of filters in front of me, and we're sort of like 50-60 yards off the roundabout, and he just stops, like just anchors up the car, nothing in front of him, just slams his brakes on, like, and I'm just like, and I mean, fortunately I reacted really quickly and I stopped about a millimeter, I think, from his car. It's just like, but then you have and my wife is sitting next to me. She's like, "Where's the horn? Toot your horn!" And I'm just thinking, well, I'm really relieved we haven't hit him. You know, it's just like, rather than I'm going to go out and rip his head off. Like, I don't know why he did that, because there didn't seem to be any reason for doing it. There was nothing that went across the road. It was just like, unfortunately, it was only 50 or 60 yards from the junction, so we weren't going that fast. Yeah. But whether he took the wrong turn and just I need to stop, but basically he just stopped dead. You know, and fortunately, I managed to stop just in time. But I thought, what was going on with me? And I realized that actually I wasn't angry. I was confused, and it's like, what was going on? Yeah. But I wasn't angry. And I think in the past, I would have been really angry. Because my wife was really angry. She's sitting next to me. She's like, "Where's the horn?" You know, it's right. And I'm sort of like, okay, this is really, but I realized that actually, if you're at a pace of peace and rest, you can deal with some of those situations. Now, if I'd gone right into the back of him or whatever, I would have been more shocked. Yeah. You know, but it was a sense of shock, but I felt that actually I was able to manage the shock. Yeah. And, you know, and he went off, and I didn't chase him after, so I'm going to get right at the back of him, you know, because I might have done in the past. It would be like, I'm going to I will let you know what you did. Yeah. I'm going to try and get past him, and, you know, I'll give him the finger when I go past. So I was like, you know, but I didn't feel that way. And I thought, okay, there's a sense where actually we can actually control the actual bodily hormonal adrenaline fight flight thing if we're living from a place of peace or rest. And if we're not, it's really hard to. Yeah. And you can say things you don't mean. You can do things you wouldn't do under any circumstance. And then you look back and think, oh, what on earth was going on? Because when you're out of it and all the adrenaline's gone, you're sort of like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. Yeah. No? Well, the interesting was this officer was talking about that when he started out. Now I think he's been like a deputy for 13 or 14 years. So he's not new. But when he first started out, he said, when I was on a chase, he said, and if I was calling it in, because they usually have to call in where they are, he said, I was all hyper and wound up and, all excited. He said, but over the years and through training, he said, you just sit there the whole time. He goes, and you may be doing like 120 miles an hour in the car chasing the person, but you are as calm and as level. And when you're speaking, it's like you're just sitting there having a normal conversation. He said, but that comes with the training of learning how to slow yourself down. He said, so that was the frustrating part. He got through all of that because he went back and listened to the recording, and he was just as calm as could be through the whole thing. And, now I'm going to do this and this. He said, and then he gets out of the car and it's like, it like totally blew up. And he said, everything I've been trained to do, I step out of the car and I lost it. And evidently it's not something that happens very often, but in this case, he goes, I just lost it. Yeah. But it just goes to show, I think, we need to train our senses to discern and begin to rule out of peace and in love. And if we're operating like that, I think we can have a powerful impact into the way we engage with the world and the community we live in.
Yeah, this has really changed my whole concept of how to pray for this county and pray for specific areas where that are problem areas where there's south part of the county, really heavy drug area with the guy said, he goes, I could stop 4 cars and 3 of them will have meth in it. He said on any given day.
Yeah.
That's how bad the problem is there. And that's just one of the many problems. So there, to know how to start to legislate over that pocket of the county. Because if you live in the northern part of the county, the chances of you having a problem, yeah, you're maybe a breaking and entering, like up where we are every once in a while. You live in that area of the county, whoa, crazy town.
Yeah.
Even if you don't live in the crazy section, you're close enough to it that there's a higher crime rate in the surrounding area, as opposed to further you get from it and further north into the county you get, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. So, but it's just between praying for them and then praying for the county, it's given me a whole different, perspective of what needs, of legislating for this local area.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Well, nice to see you. I think you've moved into your new place now. Look, your background looks different. I can't hear you, but yeah, hang on. Can I hear you? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, hi, Janice. Okay.
Hello, good to see you guys. I'm trying to get my time correct. Am I late?
Yeah, we're just finished. So yeah, you probably.
Okay. I thought, Mary, you turned your clocks back on Sunday. Is that right? No.
No, we've not either. We don't turn ours back until the last weekend in October. I think
that's the same for, it's either that or it's the first week of November. No, they changed it.
Okay, I got it wrong.